Good evening, everyone. Welcome to TT. I see a lot of familiar faces and some new ones, too. It's good to have you all here. Glad we could host tonight. I want to start by actually thanking our friends at OpenFin. TT has invested pretty heavily in JavaScript over the last few years, and so it's important for us that there exists a vibrant ecosystem for JavaScript developers and the JavaScript community inside financial services. I know there's a great one in the broader world, but getting one going inside financial services is important. And Fin.js is an important part of that ecosystem. And we all really appreciate the work that the team at OpenFin does, especially Mitra and Mazi. So thanks so much. For those of you who don't know, Fin.js has been holding events like this for a couple of years now. Until now, they've always been in New York or London. And Fin.js exists for the financial services community to be a forum where members of this community can share examples of the cool things that some of us are doing, and thought leaders from the JavaScript world outside financial services can join us and share what's going on in the wider world of JavaScript. So again, we're glad that you're here. Thanks to Mitra and Mazi for their leadership in making it all happen, and hopefully this is the first of many more of these events in Chicago. So this is the third time, and I got to try to figure out how I'm. So I'm for being a tech thing, I've got my notes here and the presentation there. So I apologize as I figure this out. So this is the third time that one of us from TT has been able to share it at Fin.js. In New York and London, we talked about how we came to choose JavaScript and the web platform as the future of our firm, and how we managed to achieve the performance necessary for our demanding customers using JavaScript. If you haven't seen a demo of what's in the video here, I encourage you to go to the room in the back over there. When we're done, you can see it firsthand. This is all one JavaScript application running across 16 monitors, running CME data from the open at 10 times speed. So we'll have a couple people by the demo at the end of the night, happy to chat about what we've done, answer questions, discuss the application in more detail. So tonight, I just wanted to share a few thoughts more as an addendum to what we talked about in New York and London. I actually think there's some repeats in the room, so this truly is an addendum. The question is, and let me see if I can, there we go. The question is, what do you do next after you've worked so hard and achieved the kind of performance that you just saw in that video? And so there's two things I want to briefly mention tonight. First is that you have to keep working on performance. Assuming that probably goes without saying for most people in the room, but that job of performance tuning is never done. And second, we want to try to find ways to leverage JavaScript to extend the application in ways that allows users of the platform, of our front end, to gain even more value from the great infrastructure that sits behind it. So first, we keep working on performance. I keep hitting the wrong button, I apologize. That's me, our chief marketing officer, came to check me working out, get a great photo for performance. So as we talked about in prior events, the core work around performance focused on leveraging shared workers and Canvas, combined with the process sharding that we get from OpenFin. And in the coming weeks and months, we're going to continue to optimize the application in a few ways. The first is that we're going to move additional streaming data into more independent workers. So, for example, the first WebSocket that we moved was supporting market data and order flow. And so we moved that into a shared worker. And the next thing that we'll be doing is taking, for example, our options analytics streaming data, which is streaming Theos and Greeks, and start to move that into an independent worker thread as well. We're also going to look to consolidate some heavy REST communication in workers. So when we started down this path of trying to tune this application, we had one large JavaScript application running in a browser, and we extracted the WebSocket that was doing the most of the streaming data and put that in a worker. And then we used OpenFin to shard, so we have many rendering processes and that one connection to the backend in the WebSocket. But the result was that all those separate rendering processes can still hit RESTful services. Often they can hit the same RESTful service separately for the same data. So by consolidating our REST requests for at least the heaviest load, especially at workspace startup, we're able to reduce the load on network bandwidth and improve the performance of the application in general. When we first moved that primary WebSocket into its own thread, we were working very iteratively and trying to move quickly. It took a long time, but we were working hard to move as fast as we could. And so to a certain extent, we left certain work behind us that we knew we had to come back to. And one of those things was revisiting the data structures that are passed between that WebSocket and the rest of the application. When it was all in one process, there was a lot of freedom in what we could pass back and forth with that, with the client that was consuming the WebSocket. Now we want to look at the data that's crossing the process boundaries and look at ways to optimize that and reduce the load on the separate rendering processes. And lastly, as we continue to tune that relationship between the worker threads and the rendering threads, we also need to begin more effectively measuring and monitoring the traffic between those processes so that we understand the conflation that happens in the rendering threads, which should help us find more bottlenecks and troubleshoot performance issues that will inevitably arise in the future. The other brief topic I wanted to talk about was how we want to look to extend the platform, extend the application from the front end using JavaScript. This is something we're just starting to explore, so I'll mention two ideas we've discussed so far. I'm not saying these are going to hit production anytime soon. In fact, they may never hit production, but they're examples of ways that we want to try to leverage JavaScript to not just deliver a great application that we've built, but then allow users to customize it. So one of the ways is allowing users to write and deploy custom JavaScript to do data analysis. And the second is allowing them to build their own widgets, which would be delivered inside the TT platform. So we have a wealth of data and resources available in the back end of the platform, which we want to find ways to expose to users in ways other than just us giving them widgets. So to that end, we're looking to expose a way for them to write JavaScript. So if you look here, this is our Trader Analytics widget, which allows a user to take a given window of time, a given set of accounts, a given set of instruments, take all the trading activity that occurred in that account in that time window for those instruments, and run it through a bunch of statistical analysis, a bunch of canned stats basically, and each one is essentially just a JavaScript function running on a time series of data. So one idea is to allow users to customize, and I realize now that the output of this great JavaScript is really small at the bottom, you can't quite see. But the idea is that we could allow users to write JavaScript inside the application itself that would then run in line in the existing transaction processing workflow. So users could create custom analytics with a few lines of JavaScript without worrying about data capture, data retention, data processing workflows. All you have to do is think about the function that you want calculated, and you can ship that, and we take care of the rest. So that's one quick example. And then the other thing we've talked about is trying to allow users to build their own widgets. So the TT user interface is already pretty modular. So this is a quick example of existing functionality. So you can see we can take different widgets, we can group them. Those widgets then interact with one another. You can have widgets that aren't grouped that can communicate with one another over a global message bus. You can even create custom widgets based on existing ones. So for example, I took a positions widget, reduced the number of columns, changed the way the positions are grouped, and I think it'll open up in the video in just a second, and able to build essentially a positions by product dashboard in a small little widget, save it as a custom widget, and now it's independent from the original positions widget, which has a ton of data, and you can see on the bottom you've got a tree of positions, and in the top left you've got a nice aggregated dashboard. Same widget, but customized, different name, different icon. I built the one in the top left inside the GUI. So we already have a pretty modular design. These widgets don't know about one another. Even when they're grouped, they really don't know if another one exists. They're simply handling messages that they receive. But they do have some underlying assumptions about the design of the architecture of the UI itself. So what we hope to do is standardize the interfaces that all widgets implement and modify the way that they're bootstrapped so that we could take a very generic widget initialization logic and then give that out to customers who'd be able to build their own widgets from scratch, but then deploy them and distribute them inside our application. They'd have full access to all the data and capabilities of the back end, but they could be tailor-made for a specific user's or firm's workflows and could even leverage that firm's data or third-party data in addition to what we provide in TT, and it makes TT more integrated into their environment. So to wrap up, as I said at the beginning, we'll never stop working on performance. And I do view the next big challenge for us as being extensibility. But I should also point out that all of that is meaningless if we're not being responsive to end users and delivering functionality that's meaningful for them. So I think maybe the most difficult part after solving the performance problems is just the product problem of how do you prioritize the features you know you need to build with the architectural changes you know you need to make for long-term extensibility. And how do you balance those two? And we can't succeed if we don't strike the right balance. So I'll just wrap up by, again, thanking you all for being here, thanking OpenFin for putting it all together. I'd be failing in my job if I didn't use the opportunity to tell you all that we're still looking to grow our JavaScript team. So if you know someone or you are someone who loves JavaScript and wants to work on an application like this, please come find me and talk to me afterwards. Of course, stop by the demo either way and feel free to check it out and ask questions. And that's it. But I did forget one thing that I was supposed to, I think, say at the beginning, which was remind everyone of who else is speaking. So I'll wrap up. And after me is Dan Schleifer from ChartIQ. And then we've got Joe McCann from NodeSource, Nick Molnar from Microsoft. And I know everyone came to hear me share about the TT platform, but Brendan Eich is going to make an appearance at the end from Brave. Thanks, everyone. And I'll hand over to Dan.